It was Christmas Eve, and the dining room glowed like a magazine cover, candles flickering silverware, glinting a 12-foot tree gleaming in the corner. My sister Evelyn stood beside it in her sequined red dress champagne flute, raised laughing with her perfect friends. I watched from the far end of the table, one hand resting on my daughter's shoulder, trying to hold on to the illusion that we were part of this family celebration. Then Chloe, my 8-year-old, reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the little gift she had wrapped herself: brown paper, a red ribbon, her handwriting wobbling across the tag. She held it up to her aunt, eyes bright. "I made this for you, Aunt Evie." Evelyn turned, took the box between manicured fingers, and let out a sharp laugh that cut through the music. "Cheap, worthless trash," she said, shaking the box. The sound of the paper tearing was louder than the jazz in the background. My father chuckled, my mother sighed, and someone whispered, "Kids these days." Chloe's face fell, lips trembling, tears spilling fast. I stood still, the laughter blurring around me. I set my glass down, smiled just enough to keep my voice even, and said, "Enjoy the night, everyone." By morning, my decision was made. I logged into the brokerage account and clicked withdraw. Every cent I had invested in Evelyn's boutique disappeared into my account. Then I called my attorney about the BMW we'd registered under both names as collateral. "Pull the title," I said, "effective today." Before noon, a message went out to Evelyn's phone. Just 6 words. "From now on, you're on your own." She thought I was joking. She had no idea everything she'd built, everything I had built for her, was already slipping through her hands. The night before that decision felt like a lifetime ago. The dining room had smelled of pine and cinnamon, and laughter bounced off the vaulted ceiling. Evelyn had insisted on hosting this year's Christmas dinner, bragging about her catering team and Aspen chic theme. I brought dessert and a quiet hope that maybe this time things would feel less lopsided. Chloe sat beside me, clutching the little gift box wrapped in recycled paper, a tiny wooden frame she had carved herself. The design was simple mountain peaks and tiny stars etched by hand, her initials tucked into one corner. She'd saved her allowance for the carving tools and spent 3 weekends sanding it smooth. When she finally handed it to Evelyn, time seemed to slow. My sister's red nails tore through the paper, and the moment her face twisted, I knew what was coming. "What is this supposed to be?" she said, holding it up like a dirty napkin. "A picture frame." "Oh, honey, did you find this in a thrift bin?" Her friends laughed. My father joined in shaking his head. "Evelyn, be nice," he muttered, but the smirk stayed. My mother sipped her wine and said, "Julia, she's just teasing. You know how sensitive you are." The heat rose up my throat. I looked at Chloe. She stood, frozen eyes wide, the ribbon still dangling from her hand. "It's for you," she whispered, voice so soft it barely carried. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Sweetheart, next time maybe ask your mom to help you buy something real." Then she dropped the frame onto the table, the wood knocking against a crystal plate. Something inside me went still. I wanted to scream to defend my daughter, but the words didn't come. The silence felt heavier than the laughter. So I just reached for my coat. Chloe followed me out to the car, her small steps quick on the icy driveway. Snow fell in slow spirals. Behind us, music and laughter kept going like nothing had happened. When we got into the car, she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, sweetheart," I said. "Some people just don't know the value of a gift." She leaned her head against the window, watching the snow. I drove in silence, headlights cutting through the white. Back home, our small house felt warm, safe. The string lights we'd hung last week blinked softly from the porch. Chloe went to her room without another word. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the window reflection of the tree we decorated together. Mismatched ornaments, a paper star she'd made in art class. I thought about every Christmas before this one, the years I paid for my parents' rent, the endless gifts for Evelyn's store openings, the loans that never came back. I told myself it was family, that blood meant loyalty. But as I watched my daughter's little shoulders slump in the hallway, something inside me hardened. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and pulled up the financial statements for Evelyn's boutique. The numbers stared back my capital, my name on every document. She'd called me her investor, but really I'd been her safety net. Rent, payroll, new inventory, all drawn from my transfers. I remembered her words that night: cheap, worthless trash. I clicked through each account, each file, feeling my pulse slow. Then I opened my phone and scrolled to the car registration photo, the BMW 2020 SUV I had co-signed. Collateral, she'd said sweetly when I agreed to help her 2 years ago. At that moment, Chloe's door opened. She came out wearing her Christmas pajamas, holding the broken frame in both hands. "Can we fix it?" she asked. The corner had splintered where Evelyn had dropped it. I took it gently. "We can," I said. "We'll make it stronger." Her smile was small but real. She nodded and went back to her room. I stayed awake long after midnight. Outside, the snow had piled against the windowsills. I drafted a single email to my lawyer's subject line: immediate asset withdrawal. I listed every document, every signature, and ended it with one line: I want everything reversed by morning. I hit send, closed the laptop, and watched the notification blink. Message sent 11:58 p.m. When I finally went to bed, the house was silent except for the hum of the heater. Chloe's nightlight cast a soft glow under her door. I stood there a moment, watching it flicker, and made a promise to myself that she would never again see someone laugh at her pain while I stayed quiet. By dawn, the world outside was white. I made coffee, opened my phone, and saw the notification from the bank: withdrawal successful. A second ping followed from the dealership lawyer confirming the BMW's title transfer back to me. My chest rose and fell with something I hadn't felt in years: calm. I sent one final text, the same 6 words that had been echoing in my mind since midnight. "From now on, you're on your own." I placed the phone face down, poured another cup of coffee, and watched the snow drift past the window. In the next room, Chloe was humming softly, carving a new piece of wood. The smell of pine mixed with the sound of her small knife against the grain. Outside, the world looked clean again, untouched. Inside, I finally understood that sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's the sound of a woman reclaiming her peace before the storm begins. She was the golden one since the day she learned to smile on cue. I used to watch her in old home videos, Evelyn twirling in her pink tutu, while I stood off to the side wearing a sweater that had belonged to her the year before. The camera always followed her, never me. My mother's voice floated in the background, soft with adoration. "Look at our little star." My father's laugh followed. "She's going places." I was 8, then already old enough to understand the pattern. Evelyn sparkled. I held the light steady so she could shine. Growing up in the Hartman house meant living under a spotlight that never turned my way. My parents weren't cruel, just deliberate in their favoritism. If Evelyn wanted ballet, she got private lessons. If I wanted to take a computer class, it was too expensive. She got a camera for Christmas, I got to hold the batteries. Mom always said, "You're the strong one, Jules. You don't need much, but strength is a funny thing. It grows when you have to survive without applause." By high school, Evelyn had mastered the art of being adored. She was the cheer captain, the homecoming queen, the one who never had to clean up after a party because she had delicate hands. I was the one who cleaned anyway, just to keep peace. When she crashed Dad's old Buick senior year, I sold my art supplies to help cover repairs. She never thanked me. She just asked if I could drive her to practice. That was our rhythm, her needing me, providing. And back then I thought that was love. Adulthood didn't change much. I went to college on scholarships, worked nights at a bookstore, and earned a finance degree. Evelyn dropped out of her fashion program after 2 semesters and floated from one creative pursuit to another. First photography, then interior design, then jewelry making. Each time she claimed she'd found her true calling. Each time the bills followed her home and I somehow ended up paying them. Mom said family helps family, And I believed her. Even after my divorce, even after moving to remote work to raise Chloe alone, I kept wiring money whenever someone in the family just needed a little help. When Dad got laid off from the construction company, I paid their mortgage for almost a year. When Mom's car broke down, I sent enough to buy another. "You're such a blessing," she'd say. But blessings can turn into habits, and habits can hollow you out. Somewhere along the way, I became the family's quiet provider, the invisible safety net that no one ever thanked, but everyone depended on. Then came the day Evelyn arrived at my house with a portfolio clutched under her arm. It was early spring, the mountains still white with leftover snow. She set the folder on my kitchen table and spread glossy pages across it like playing cards. "Aspen Grace Boutique," she said proudly. "A sustainable fashion line. Local fabrics, high-end designs, exclusive clientele." Her tone sparkled like champagne. Chloe sat nearby coloring at the counter and looked up every few seconds with a curious smile. Evelyn talked fast, her voice rehearsed, full of buzzwords she barely understood. Profit margins break, even points, influencer partnerships. She said she needed $70,000 to launch. I almost laughed, but she wasn't joking. She had even brought a business plan with printed charts and color-coded projections. "This is my dream, Jules," she said, "and I can make it real if you just help me this once." I reminded her that I had a daughter, that I couldn't gamble savings I'd spent years building. She nodded solemnly, then smiled the same smile that always melted Mom and Dad. "It's not gambling," she said. "It's investing. You're smart with money. You could be my partner." The words hit me like bait laced with flattery. Partner. Not backup, not rescuer, partner. For the first time, she was offering me a title, a place beside her instead of behind her. I wanted to believe it. We met our parents the next day at a downtown cafe. Evelyn spread her plans again, glowing under the soft light. Dad leaned in, impressed by the photos. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "Our Evelyn finally found her path," she whispered. No one asked how she'd pay me back. No one looked at me at all until Mom said, "You could afford to help, right, honey? You've always been so responsible." That was her way of turning guilt into obligation. I told them I'd think about it. That night I lay awake listening to the wind against the windows. I thought about all the times I'd rescued them, how it always started with just this once. But then I imagined Evelyn failing again, calling me in tears, and Mom's voice saying, "If only you'd helped." I got out of bed, opened my laptop, and began calculating risk scenarios as if I were analyzing a stranger's proposal. On paper, it looked terrible. But family doesn't live on paper. A week later, we met with a lender named Lane Foster. He explained the terms: 5-year repayment, 5.5% interest, and a 2020 BMW as collateral. The car had been my idea. I wanted some form of security, something tangible if everything went wrong. Evelyn frowned but signed quickly. Her hand shook a little, not with fear, but with excitement. "You'll see, Jules," she said. "This is our big break." Dad clapped her on the shoulder. Mom kissed her cheek. I signed last, heart heavy but steady. By sunset, the money was wired, the car retitled, and Evelyn was posting a celebratory selfie captioned "Dreams in Motion." The first few months were promising. The boutique opened downtown, soft lighting, pale wood shelves, a floral scent drifting from the doorway. Influencers visited, posting stories with tags like #Aspen Grace and #Local Luxury. Evelyn sent me photos of smiling customers holding shopping bags. Each month I received a payment right on time, just as the contract said. Even Mom bragged about her 2 successful daughters. For a moment I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the pattern had broken. But little cracks appeared quickly. One evening at dinner, Evelyn arrived wearing a new designer coat. Mom gasped, "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've worked so hard." When I asked how business was doing, she shrugged. "You know, growing pains. But don't worry, I'm on it." Later that week, I saw her tagged in photos at a rooftop party in Denver, Bottles Music, a caption that read "Boss Life." I tried to ignore it. peace is addictive and I'd gone too long without it. When quarterly reports came and some numbers didn't add up, marketing costs, doubling unexplained consulting fees, I reached out politely asking for clarification. Evelyn replied with a winking emoji, all under control, big sis. Mom called that weekend to say Evelyn was under a lot of stress and I should stop being so critical. You've always been too serious, Julia, she said. Let her live a little. I almost laughed. Let her live a little on my dime again. But I stayed quiet because silence had always been my way of keeping the family from fracturing. A few weeks later, Evelyn hosted a dinner to celebrate the boutique's 6-month anniversary. She reserved a table at a trendy restaurant and invited local press. The photos went online that night, Evelyn in gold champagne in hand, the caption reading, "Thankful for my family's endless support." The picture showed her between our parents, their smiles wide. I wasn't there. I had stayed home helping Chloe finish a school project. My name wasn't in the article either, just hers. I stared at the glowing screen until it dimmed. For years, I had believed that giving enough would earn love, that loyalty would someday be returned. But looking at that photo, I saw what I truly was, a silent investor in a family that would never pay dividends. Outside, the mountains shimmered under a thin layer of snow. Chloe's laughter drifted from the other room, pure and unburdened. I turned off my phone and whispered to myself, maybe silence isn't peace. Maybe it's just unpaid debt. That night, as the wind howled beyond the windows, I felt the first fissure open. Not in Evelyn's dream, but in mine. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. And deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. This boutique isn't just a store, Jules, it's our legacy. Evelyn's voice rang through the cafe like a sales pitch she'd practiced in front of a mirror. She slid another glossy page toward me, her nails clicking against the table. I looked down at the words, Aspen Grace Boutique, printed in gold script, followed by a list of projections, rent estimates, and something she called brand synergy. The smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the air. Outside, snow drifted lazily down Main Street. Inside, my sister was building a castle made of numbers and charm. Mom dabbed her mouth with a napkin, glowing with pride. She's finally found her purpose, she said. Dad nodded, eyes twinkling behind his glasses. You have to admit, Jules, it's impressive. I did admit it, at least out loud. The presentation was polished, the numbers clean, but I'd learned long ago that Evelyn could dress anything in sparkle, even a lie. She leaned forward, lowering her voice into something intimate. You'd be perfect as my silent partner. I'll handle the creative, you handle the numbers, just like old times. I wanted to laugh. There were no old times when we'd been equals. She had always been the face, I the shadow, holding up the lights. I don't know, I said, stirring my coffee. 70,000 is a lot to risk. Her eyes widened just a touch. It's not a risk, it's a chance. Think of it as family equity. You'll get your investment back in 18 months, maybe sooner. And Jules, I've changed. I'm ready for this. The words I've changed hung between us like fog. Mom reached across the table, touching my wrist. She just needs one person to believe in her. Family helps family. Family helps family. The phrase had become a mantra I couldn't seem to unlearn. I wanted to tell them no, that I'd worked too hard rebuilding my life after the divorce to gamble it all on another of Evelyn's dreams. But they were looking at me with such certainty, like my hesitation was the only thing standing between our family and redemption. All right, I said finally, but it needs to be official. A contract, interest, collateral. Dad frowned. You don't need lawyers between sisters. I do, I said quietly. Evelyn sighed, flipping her hair. Fine. Whatever makes you feel safe. But the way she said it made it sound like weakness. A week later, I found myself in a small glass office downtown with a lender named Lane Foster. He was efficient, polite, and clearly used to family investments going sour. He read the paperwork twice, then looked at us over the rim of his glasses. The terms are straightforward, he said. 5-year repayment, 5.5% interest, the BMW as collateral. Evelyn's pen hovered for a second before she signed. This is just a formality, she said lightly. I sign next. My hand didn't shake, but my chest felt heavy. After the meeting, she hugged me in the parking lot. You won't regret this, Jules. You're saving me. I'm investing, I corrected. Same thing. The boutique opened that June. Evelyn chose a narrow storefront on Aspen's main street, its windows framed by pale wood and soft lighting. The sign Aspen Grace Boutique gleamed in brushed gold letters. On opening day, she wore a white suit and a 1,000-watt smile. Mom and Dad stood proudly beside her, posing for photos. I stayed near the counter, managing the invoices. People streamed in the air, thick with perfume and flattery. Local influencers snapped selfies holding silk scarves and hand-woven handbags. Someone handed Evelyn a microphone, and she thanked everyone who believed in this dream. She never mentioned my name. Mom Chloe whispered, tugging my sleeve. Why isn't your name on the sign? I smiled and brushed a crumb from her cheek. It's her dream, sweetheart. That night, after the champagne bottles were cleared and the last guest had gone, I stood outside the boutique staring at the glow through the window. For a moment, I let myself feel proud. I'd done something good. Something that might finally bring us closer. The next morning, the local paper ran a photo of Evelyn holding scissors at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The headline read, Aspen's Rising Star Opens Boutique. The caption beneath listed everyone except me. 3 months later, the payments began arriving like clockwork. Lane forwarded the confirmations each month, his tone approving. Your sister's consistent, he said. And for a while, she was. The store did well that summer. Tourists loved the mountain luxury aesthetic. Evelyn posted daily on social media, showcasing local designers and posing with models. She started getting invitations to charity luncheons and photo shoots. Mom kept every clipping. You must be so proud, she'd tell me. I was in a quiet, cautious way. By autumn, Evelyn had hired 3 employees and was talking about expanding to Denver. I advised against it too soon, too much overhead, but she brushed me off. You're thinking like an accountant. I'm thinking like an artist. At Thanksgiving, she arrived in a new BMW SUV, the same one used as collateral for the loan. Mom clapped her hands. Our girl deserves something nice after all her hard work. I nearly choked on my wine. When I asked if she had paid off the first car, she said, Of course, I'm not stupid. In December, we attended a fundraiser at the town hall. Evelyn was one of the event's sponsors, the boutique logo printed in gold at the bottom of the invitation. She wore a gown that shimmered like ice under the chandeliers. Dad introduced her to guests as our little entrepreneur. When someone asked about funding, she smiled coyly. A private investor believed in me. The phrase made me wince. Private investor. It sounded clinical, detached, exactly what I was trying not to be. But the truth was there, I had believed. After the event, I stepped out onto the balcony for air. The cold bit at my skin, the kind of sharp that makes you feel alive and foolish all at once. Through the window, I watched Evelyn laughing, with a group of donors hand on Dad's arm, her charm a perfect performance. She looked radiant. And yet, behind the smiles, I saw the cracks, the way she avoided certain questions, the tension in her posture when the conversation turned to numbers. The next morning, I stopped by the boutique unannounced. The lights were dim. 2 shelves sat empty. A young employee told me Evelyn had gone to Denver for meetings. On her desk lay a receipt for a hotel suite and a designer handbag. I stared at the total $4,000, marketing expense, it said. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. Sorry for missing you today. Things are great. Expansion next quarter. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the financial dashboard. The numbers didn't match the report she'd sent earlier. Sales were steady, but withdrawals had spiked. A new category labeled Consulting Fees, Grace Hartman. My mother's name. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold twist in my stomach. I printed every page and tucked the documents into a folder marked 4 Lane. Later that night, Chloe wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked. I smiled weakly, just thinking about work. She nodded, still half asleep. "I like Aunt Evelyn's store. It smells nice." "Yes," I said softly, "it does." When she went back to bed, I sat at the table for a long time. The house was quiet except for the wind rattling the windows. I thought about the headline, "Aspen's Rising Star." About the smile on Evelyn's face when the cameras flashed. About the money I'd worked years to save now, tangled in her glittering mess. I closed my laptop and whispered, "Let her shine." But even then, a part of me knew the light around her wasn't real. It was borrowed, and I was the one paying the electric bill. The first missed payment didn't worry me. The second one did. It was just after midnight when I noticed an alert from the bank glowing blue across my dark living room. I stared at the words "payment not received," a sentence so polite, it almost hid the truth. It wasn't just a delay. It was the beginning of something breaking. I sat there with my laptop open, the only light in the room flickering off the window pane. Chloe was asleep down the hall, her nightlight casting soft shapes on the wall. Outside, the snow had started again, dusting the porch in silence. I scrolled through the account dashboard, watching the numbers dip. The transfer from the boutique that should have hit my account that morning was missing. I refreshed. Still nothing. By the following afternoon, I'd convinced myself it was a clerical error. I called Evelyn. She answered on the third ring, sounding breathless like she'd been laughing. "Oh, Jules, don't panic. Supplier delays. The fabric shipment got stuck in Denver. I'll make double next month." I wanted to believe her, and she sounded so sure, so casual. But when another week passed, and the payment still didn't appear, I drove into town. The boutique's window displays were half empty. A handwritten sign read, "Closed for renovation." The lights inside were off, dust coating the edges of the mannequins. I called again. This time she didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a text came through, "Relax, sis. Everything's fine." There was a photo attached, her in a pool chair, somewhere, sunny sunglasses glinting. The caption read, "Taking a quick mental break before the spring rush." That evening, Mom called out of nowhere, her tone bright but sharp around the edges. "Your sister's exhausted, Julia. You know how hard she works. Can't you just give her a little grace? She's behind on her loan," I said evenly. "This isn't a vacation she can afford. She just needs time. Don't ruin Christmas again with all your seriousness." There it was, the old script. I could almost hear Dad in the background, the clink of his glass against the counter. "You're being harsh," he muttered. I stared at the phone for a long time after hanging up, my reflection ghosted on the screen. The same conversation year after year. Evelyn plays the fragile artist, and I'm the cold-hearted accountant who doesn't understand love. The following Monday, I logged into the boutique's shared financial drive, something I hadn't done in months. The numbers told a different story. Expenses had tripled. Under marketing costs, I found entries for luxury hotels, spa treatments, and brand retreat Palm Springs. I scrolled further, stopping at one labeled "Consulting Fee Grace Hartman." My mother, $2,000. I printed the statement and stared at it under the lamplight, the ink still warm. My pulse thudded in my ears. There it was, proof that I wasn't paranoid. They were all in on it. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I slipped the pages into a folder, sealed it, and tucked it into my safe. Evidence, not emotion. That night, Chloe found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring into space. "You're still working?" she asked, yawning. "Just wrapping things up," I said. She smiled sleepily. "You should rest, Mom. You work too much." I brushed her hair back and kissed her forehead. "Soon." After she went back to bed, I poured a glass of water, but it tasted metallic. Everything did lately, like my body was learning the flavor of tension. I opened the group chat my family used for birthdays and announcements. The most recent photo was Evelyn at a dinner table, surrounded by friends holding up a glass of champagne. The caption read, To family, my biggest blessing. I closed the app. 2 days later, I stopped by Mom and Dad's house for Sunday dinner. The living room smelled like pot roast and pine cleaner. The tree was already up even though it was barely December. Evelyn wasn't there, she'd sent flowers instead, a gesture Mom proudly displayed in the middle of the table. Dad poured wine. "She's working hard," he said before I even asked. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Mom's eyes flashed. "Don't start, Julia. You've always resented her. I'm not resenting anyone. I just want her to follow the contract she signed." Contracts. Contracts, Mom sighed, waving her hand. "You sound like one of those lawyers you hire. This is family." "Family doesn't steal," I said quietly. The room went still. Dad cleared his throat. "Watch your tone." I stood, leaving my plate untouched. "I'll send the payment records," I said. "You can decide for yourselves who's lying." On the drive home, the snow was falling heavier, thick enough to blur the headlights. My phone buzzed, Evelyn calling again. I almost ignored it but picked up. Her voice was syrupy, slurred at the edges. "You really embarrassed Mom tonight," she was crying. "I didn't say anything untrue. You're always trying to make me look bad." "I don't have to," I said. "You're doing fine on your own." She laughed, the sound brittle and hollow. "You think you're better than us, sitting up there with your spreadsheets and perfect life." "Perfect," I said. "You mean the one I built while paying your bills?" Silence on the line, followed by a click. By the time I reached home, the road was slick and glittering under the streetlights. I parked, turned off the engine, and just sat there. The house windows glowed faintly. Chloe's nightlight flickered through the curtains. For a long time I didn't move. The next morning I woke to a flurry of new messages. Evelyn had posted a video from her trip, Sunlight Laughter, her wearing a wide-brimmed hat, music in the background. "Recharge before relaunch," the caption said. Comments poured in Queen energy. "So inspiring, love this journey for you." I scrolled past them, all thumb trembling. Then I opened my bank app. The rent for Mom and Dad's house, paid automatically every month by me, was due in 2 days. I hovered over the toggle for autopay. For years I'd told myself that silence kept things steady, that peace required sacrifice. But peace had become a one-way street paved with my own exhaustion. I toggled off the autopay and watched the screen flash green, payment canceled. The click of that button felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. That night, I placed the printed statements back on the kitchen table and stared at them under the soft lamplight. The numbers were no longer just figures, they were confessions. Spa trips disguised as business costs, consulting fees to parents, credit cards maxed out in my name. I ran my fingers along the edges of the papers, then tucked them back into the safe. Chloe's laughter echoed faintly from her room, a soft reminder that my world didn't revolve around them anymore. Just before bed, my phone buzzed with another message from Evelyn. "Promise I'll catch up next month. Family always comes through." I didn't reply. The snow outside had stopped, leaving the night impossibly still. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, the warmth seeping through my palms. Somewhere in the darkness, I thought I heard laughter, hers maybe, or just memory, but it didn't reach me anymore. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like surrender. It felt like distance. And distance, I realized, was its own kind of freedom. It wasn't one big lie, it was 1,000 small ones that finally showed through the cracks. The first was the Instagram post. Evelyn stood outside her boutique, holding a cup of coffee, smiling like the cover of a lifestyle magazine. 6 months of success, the caption read. Behind her, I noticed the reflection in the window, empty shelves, a dim light flickering inside. She'd angled the camera perfectly to hide the decay. Mom had already shared the post, adding her own caption, "Our brilliant girl living her dream." I stared at my phone until the battery warning popped up. Beneath all the glitter and filters, I could feel the rot spreading. 2 days later, I called her. "We need to talk," I said. Her tone was bright. "Sure, let's do lunch. I'll bring samples from the new line." We met at a cafe downtown, the same one where her pitch had first begun. She arrived late, wrapped in a designer coat, sunglasses still on though it was snowing. "Sorry," she said, sliding into the booth. "The boutique's been crazy." I waited until she ordered a latte before pulling the envelope from my bag. "You're behind on payments. Again." She waved her hand dismissively. "Jules, relax. The numbers are just off because I'm reinvesting. You wouldn't understand creative businesses' ebb and flow." Ebb and flow. I opened the folder, spread the documents on the table. Spa weekends, hotels, personal shopping trips. "You're funding your lifestyle with company money." She laughed, an airy, practiced sound. "You make it sound so sinister. It's branding, Jules. Clients expect a certain image." I pointed to another entry. "And this consulting fees paid to Mom." Her smile faltered. "They've been helping with contacts. You know, customer referrals. I've read the statements. There are no referrals. Just withdrawals." Her face hardened. "Don't make this ugly." I leaned back, heart steady now. "It's already ugly." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she pushed her latte aside and stood up. "I don't have time for your paranoia," she said. "You've never believed in me. That's why you'll always be stuck behind a desk while I'm building something that matters." She walked out before I could respond, leaving the receipt fluttering on the table. That night Mom called. "What did you say to your sister?" "She's devastated." I asked her about missing money. "She told us you threatened to pull funding." I asked her to explain her expenses. "Julia," Mom sighed, "you're too harsh. Not everyone is as practical as you. Evelyn's an artist. You're suffocating her with numbers. Numbers are what keep her lights on." "Don't talk like that," she snapped. "Your father's right, you've lost your compassion." I wanted to scream that compassion had cost me $70,000. Instead, I said, "I'm done being the villain for telling the truth." Then I hung up. The next morning at work, Casey noticed the shadows under my eyes. "Family again?" she asked. "Always." She tilted her head. "Start saving your receipts. If this goes legal, you'll need a trail." I managed a weak smile. "You sound like my lawyer. I sound like someone who's seen this before." That night, I followed her advice. I opened a new folder on my computer, labeled Hartman Investments, and scanned every document I had. Then I printed 2 copies, one for my safe, one for Miles, my lawyer. It felt sterile and final, like closing a file on something that used to be love. 2 weeks later, Evelyn hosted a fundraiser at the town's art center. Mom called to insist I attend. "It'll mean a lot if you show support." "I'm not sure she wants me there." "Nonsense," she said. "You're her backbone." The irony almost made me laugh. I went, anyway. The room sparkled with chandeliers and laughter. Evelyn stood at the center, radiant in a gold gown, greeting guests with practiced warmth. Her boutique logo gleamed on the sponsor board, Aspen Grace Boutique Gold-level donor. My stomach clenched. When she spotted me, her smile flickered just for a heartbeat. Then she turned to a man beside her and introduced him to my parents. "This is Daniel Porter, our newest investor." Investor. The word hit me like ice water. She'd replaced me already. I stayed at the back of the room near the coat rack, watching as she clinked glasses and posed for photos. When the host took the stage to thank sponsors, Evelyn beamed, basking under the applause. "Our family is the heart of Aspen Grace," the host said. Cameras flashed. The photographer gestured for a group photo. My parents stood proudly beside her, arms around her waist. I wasn't invited. I watched through the lens as the flash went off, freezing them in their perfect tableau, the golden child framed by the parents who never looked my way. Afterward, I stepped out into the cold. Snowflakes clung to my hair, melted against my coat. I walked to the parking lot, my breath coming out in small clouds. There, parked under a streetlight, was her BMW, the same car I'd signed for as collateral. A new designer bag sat on the passenger seat, still in its box. I placed my hand on the hood. The metal was icy, the engine still warm. Inside the building, I could hear faint laughter through the glass. I thought of Chloe asleep at home, of the quiet peace that had started to return to our lives. And I knew deep down something had shifted. Whatever existed between me and Evelyn, whatever had once passed for sisterhood was gone. On Monday, I met Miles in his office downtown. He looked over the documents I'd brought and nodded. "You've got everything. Every expense, every message, every transfer." He leaned back. "Then you're protected. If she defaults, you can repossess the BMW and terminate funding. But Julia, once you do, there's no going back. I don't plan on going back." When I left his office, I felt lighter even as the wind cut across the street. Later that night, I sat at my desk staring at a photo on my wall, me and Evelyn, as kids sitting in the snow cheeks, red arms around each other. We looked happy. Maybe we were before favoritism and envy grew into something darker. I took the frame down and set it in a drawer. The next morning, the family group chat lit up with new photos from the fundraiser. Evelyn tagged my parents, her new investor, even the event's caterer. The caption read, "Grateful for the people who believe in me." Not one word about the person who made the dream possible. I stared at the photo of them laughing, my parents' eyes full of pride, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. When I closed the app, my reflections stared back at me from the black screen, calm, composed, almost unrecognizable. For years I'd been told that speaking up made me difficult, that silence was strength. But silence had only kept me invisible. That night, as I turned off the lights, I whispered to the darkness, "She can keep the spotlight. I'll take the truth." Outside, the wind howled across the mountains, carrying flakes of snow like ash. Somewhere downtown, the boutique lights flickered, struggling to stay on. And for the first time, I felt ready to let them burn out. The house smelled of pine and roasted ham, the kind of warmth that used to mean safety. Snow glowed blue through the windows, soft jazz hummed under the laughter. My mother's dining table shimmered with silverware, crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of white roses that Evelyn had sent from the boutique. Everyone looked perfect, every smile rehearsed. I stood near the door, smoothing Chloe's dress, trying to convince myself that this year might be different. Julia, Mom called, air-kissing my cheek. "You made it. Oh, look at Chloe." "Isn't she growing up so fast?" Chloe smiled shyly, clutching the little box she'd spent weeks carving and painting. She'd used her allowance to buy brass hinges and glued tiny holly leaves on top. "I made this for Aunt Evelyn," she whispered. Evelyn swept into the room like a commercial for luxury red sequin dress. Perfect curl, champagne flute in hand. "Merry Christmas." Everyone, she sang, drawing applause from relatives I barely recognized. When she noticed us, her smile flickered, then returned brighter. "Oh, Jules, you came. How nice." Chloe stepped forward, holding the box with both hands. "Merry Christmas, Aunt Evie," she said softly. "I made this for you." Evelyn took the box, turning it over in her manicured fingers. "Handmade again, huh?" she said, voice light but cutting. "You really are your mother's daughter." The table quieted, forks paused mid-air. Evelyn lifted the lid, peered inside at the empty velvet lining meant for her jewelry, and laughed a high, sharp sound that broke through the music. "Cheap, worthless trash," she said. Someone at the table chuckled. "Oh." Evelyn, Mom smiled awkwardly. "She's joking, sweetheart. Don't be so sensitive." Chloe's eyes filled. She stood frozen, knuckles white around her napkin. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. The room tilted. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice came out calm. "That's enough," I said quietly. Evelyn waved me off, still laughing. "Oh, Jules, don't get dramatic. It's Christmas. She'll forget by morning." The others went back to talking, pretending nothing had happened. My father poured more wine. Mom leaned over to whisper, "You always take things too personally." Chloe's small hand reached for mine under the table. I squeezed it once hard, then stood. "Enjoy the night, everyone," I said. No one stopped us as I helped Chloe into her coat. Snow drifted heavier, now muting the music as we stepped outside. I could still hear laughter echoing through the windows like ghosts rehearsing happiness. Chloe didn't speak during the drive home. She sat with the box in her lap, the lid cracked where Evelyn's ring had dented it. "Did I make her mad?" she asked finally. "No," I said. My voice was steady, almost too steady. "You showed her something real. People like her don't know what to do with real." She looked out the window. Street lights blurred against the falling snow. "Can we fix it?" "Yes," I said, "but not tonight." When we got home, the house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heater. I hung our coats and tucked her into bed. She was asleep before I turned off the light, her small hand still clutching the corner of the broken gift. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. The glow of the screen reflected off the window like another version of me, tired, calm, finished. I opened the banking app. All those years of payments, rent, transfers, boutique funding, endless withdrawals in the name of family. My thumb hovered over the investment account linked to Evelyn's business. The balance blinked back at me. $70,000 principal, unpaid interest, a promise gone stale. I clicked withdraw. A prompt appeared. "Are you sure you want to close this account?" "Yes," I whispered. The progress bar filled slowly like a breath being held. When it turned green, I exhaled. Next, I called Miles Turner. He picked up on the second ring. "Julia, it's Christmas. Everything okay? It will be," I said. "I'm activating repossession for the BMW." He hesitated. Effective immediately. Effective immediately. "You've got everything documented, every receipt, every signature." "Then Merry Christmas," he said quietly. When I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat staring at the twinkling tree Chloe and I had decorated the week before. Every ornament was handmade paper stars, painted pine cones, little wooden hearts, things with no price tag but full of meaning. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "Haha, good one. You'd never actually pull the plug. Love you, sis." I set the phone down without replying. Outside, the snow kept falling soft and endless. Inside, the heater clicked steady and warm. I could still hear Evelyn's laugh in my head, sharp as glass, replaying like a bad song. But the sound was fading. When morning came, light spilled through the curtains in pale gold. Chloe patted into the kitchen hair, messy, eyes sleepy. "Can we fix the box today?" she asked. I smiled, stirring sugar into my coffee. "We can do better than that." She tilted her head. "Better. We'll make a new one. Stronger." After breakfast, while she worked at her little craft table, I opened my laptop. Emails stacked up from Lane Foster, the lender. The title transfer for the BMW was already processing. Lane's message was short, confirmed. Repossession order scheduled for December 27th, 1000A. No extensions. I forwarded it to Miles with 2 words, "Proceed fully." Chloe's laughter floated from the living room. She was sanding a new piece of wood, humming under her breath. I watched her for a moment, steady hands, focused eyes, and realized she'd already learned the lesson I had spent years avoiding: when something breaks beyond repair, you build again from scratch. The phone buzzed again around noon. Mom's name lit the screen. I let it ring. Then came Evelyn's voice, message, her tone syrupy sweet. "Hey sis, look, I know you were upset last night, but can we not make a big thing of it? Family fights are temporary. Love you." I deleted it before it ended. Later, I took Chloe to the park. The air was sharp and clean, the mountains cutting a perfect edge against the sky. She tossed snowballs into the air, laughing when they burst apart. Watching her, I felt something unclench inside me. When we got home, I checked my phone again. Another message from the bank: funds successfully transferred. The boutique account now read 0. I typed a single line in the family group chat, attached 2 photos, one of the BMW parked in Evelyn's driveway and one of the canceled rent transfer for Mom and Dad. Then I wrote, "From today, you're on your own." Phones buzzed all over town. Evelyn's head must have snapped up the second the notification hit. I imagined her staring at the screen, reading it twice before the color drained from her face. She'd think I was bluffing. But I'd finally learned that silence could be louder than screaming. That evening, I sat on the couch with Chloe. We watched the fire crackle, her head resting against my shoulder. She'd glued the new box together, this one, thicker, the corners reinforced. On the lid, she carved a single word in tiny letters. Strong. I traced it with my fingertip. It's perfect, I said. She smiled. I like it better than the old one. Outside, the world was buried in white quiet and clean. Somewhere, Evelyn was realizing that everything she'd taken for granted was gone: her car, her money, her safety net. I turned off my phone and let the quiet settle. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like power. Snow still covered the yard the morning after Christmas, glinting under the thin winter sun. I sat at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, the steam curling into the cold air. Miles had texted earlier, repossess order confirmed. I read it twice, then set the phone down beside Chloe's half-finished puzzle. Merry Christmas, Evelyn, I whispered to no one. By mid-morning, I had already sent a string of emails: bank notifications, contract closures, loan termination confirmations. Every message ended with the same line: effective immediately. It was strange how simple justice could sound in an email. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet efficiency. The calm after 8 years of being the family's safety net. The plan unfolded like clockwork. Miles's firm handled the legal filings while Lane, the lender, managed the repossession logistics. I had documented every withdrawal, every delayed payment, every message where Evelyn had promised to catch up next month. There would be no more extensions. Outside, the world was white and silent. Inside, the only sound was Chloe humming softly at the kitchen table, carving wood shavings into the shape of tiny birds. I watched her fingers move steady, precise, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. At 10:04 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A live feed link from the repossession company. I clicked it. The camera showed Evelyn's boutique, the BMW parked crookedly outside the gold sign of Aspen Grace Boutique glinting behind her. 2 men in reflective vests walked up the driveway, hook and chain in hand. Evelyn stormed out, still and her robe phone pressed to her ear. "You can't do this," she shouted. One of the men pointed to the paperwork. Signed, "Order, ma'am. Collateral repossession." She turned in circles, yelling for someone, anyone, to stop them. But no one came. The chain clicked, the engine growled, and the car lifted off the ground like a broken promise. I muted the sound and kept watching. The camera panned to her face, the same one that had laughed at my daughter 2 nights ago. Only now her lipstick was smeared, her eyes wild. She kicked at the snow, yelling something I couldn't hear. The feed ended. I closed the tab and took another sip of coffee. It tasted warm and final. 2 hours later, the first call came. Evelyn's name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. A second call followed, then a third. By the fourth, I let it ring until voicemail picked up. Her voice was sharp at first, then pleading. "You're ruining my life. Please, Jules, we can fix this. I'll pay you back double. Don't do this. Delete." The fifth message came from Mom. "Julia, what have you done?" Evelyn's in tears. "How could you embarrass your family like this?" I wanted to laugh. Embarrass the family. The family that had watched my child cry while they sipped wine. By the 6th call, my phone was on silent. Chloe was on the floor nearby, building small wooden animals, humming Christmas songs under her breath. I let the chaos of my relatives spin itself into static in the background. That afternoon, Miles called. "Everything's gone through clean," he said. "Car repossessed, investment pulled, contract terminated." "Good," I said. "You're calm. I'm done," he chuckled softly. "It's strange, isn't it? Closure rarely looks dramatic. Just paperwork and quiet. That's all I ever wanted," I said. By evening, the messages had changed tone. Less fury, more desperation. Evelyn texted, "You've destroyed everything I built." I typed back one sentence and then deleted it before sending. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The next morning, my parents called through video chat. I could see the disapproval before they spoke. Mom's tight smile, Dad's furrowed brow. We just want to understand, Mom began. There's nothing to understand, I said. Your sister's struggling, Dad added. She can't pay her rent now. Do you really think this is how families should treat each other? She signed a contract, I replied. You're hiding behind paperwork again, Mom snapped. When did you become so heartless? When you taught me that love without respect is servitude, I said, then ended the call. For a while, I just sat there listening to the ticking of the clock. The air felt lighter, though. My heart still ached in strange ways. Chloe peeked into the room, her face curious. You okay? I'm better than okay, I said. She smiled, then went back to her crafts. The day passed quietly. Around 5 p.m., Miles sent another message confirming the final bank transfers. Every automatic payment that had left my account for 8 years, my parents' rent utilities insurance, was officially deactivated. I opened the family group chat and typed a single line from "Today you're on your own." I attached 2 photos, one of the BMW being towed, another of the canceled rent receipt. Then I hit send and muted the thread. Within minutes, messages exploded across the screen. Mom, Julia. This is cruel. Evelyn, are you insane, Dad? You'll regret this. I turned off the phone and let the noise fade. That night, I built a fire in the hearth while Chloe finished sanding her wooden bird. Can I paint it gold? She asked. Gold, I said, smiling. Sure. Why gold? Because gold doesn't break, she said. She painted carefully, brush strokes small and patient. The smell of pine and paint filled the air. I watched her, the light flickering against her face, and realized this was what strength looked like, not revenge or anger, but the quiet act of choosing peace over chaos. When she was done, she held up the tiny bird. It glowed softly in the firelight, imperfect but beautiful. I placed it on the mantel. It's perfect, I said. Later that night, the phone vibrated once more. I picked it up to check the screen. Evelyn again. No message this time, just her name blinking. Then it stopped. I looked at the reflection of the fire in the dark window, my own face faint behind it. The world outside was buried in snow. I thought of all the years I'd spent explaining, apologizing, waiting for them to change. And how, in the end, all it took to reclaim my peace was 6 words and a signature. When I finally went to bed, the phone lay silent on the nightstand. Chloe's soft breathing filled the house. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was realizing that the money had never been the real loss. It was me. I closed my eyes and let the quiet sink in. For the first time in a long time, it didn't sound empty. It sounded earned. By noon, I was officially the villain of the Hartman family. My phone lit up with messages faster than I could silence them, angry texts, guilt-ridden voicemails, group chat explosions. Mom's voice came through, first sharp and trembling. How could you do this to your sister on Christmas, Julia? You've humiliated us all. Then Evelyn, crying and furious in equal measure, you ruined my life. You've always been jealous of me. I stood by the kitchen window, coffee going cold in my hand, watching snow fall onto the quiet street outside. For years I had begged for peace, for understanding, for fairness. Now that I had taken it, they called it cruelty. I let the phone vibrate until it went still. That afternoon my parents arrived unannounced. Their old sedan crunched up the driveway tires, groaning against the ice. When I opened the door, Mom's face was blotchy from tears. Dad's jaw tight with restrained anger. We need to talk, Dad, said, stepping inside before I could refuse. Mom's voice shook. Evelyn told us what you did. You took everything from her. You had no right. I folded my arms. I had every right. It was my investment, my loan, my name on the paperwork. She's your sister, Mom snapped. Family comes first. I've been putting this family first my whole adult life, I said. When Dad lost his job, when you couldn't make rent, when Evelyn needed a car, a business, another chance, I was the one who paid for it. Dad slammed his hand on the counter. You embarrassed us. She's the talk of the town now, humiliated because of you. She humiliated herself, I said softly. I just stopped paying for the spotlight. The room went silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Mom's voice broke through. Small and desperate. You're heartless. I opened the front door and gestured toward the snow. Maybe, but I'm free. They left without another word, the sound of the car fading into the cold. That night the noise moved online. Evelyn had posted a photo of herself sitting on the floor of the empty boutique, mascara streaked down her face, captioned, "Some people love control more than family." The comments flooded in "Stay strong, girl. You'll rise again. Family can be so toxic." Mom commented a line of heart emojis. I scrolled through the thread until my chest went hollow, then I took a screenshot and archived it. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. The next morning, Miles called to check in. "The legal filings are complete. She can't reopen the boutique under that name without your approval." "Good," I said. "You holding up?" "I'm fine," I lied. He hesitated. "They'll push back harder before they stop. Just keep everything documented. I have every receipt." By that afternoon, Evelyn's downfall began to show. Her suppliers demanded payment. Customers complained about unfulfilled orders. The boutique's social media page turned from curated perfection to chaos. One former employee posted a review owner under investigation. "Don't shop here." I watched the dominoes fall one by one and felt nothing but relief. Not joy, not revenge, just relief. Then the calls started again. Evelyn first, her voice cracking. "Please, Jules, just restart the payments for Mom and Dad. I'll figure everything else out. They're scared." "I told you," I said, calmly, "you're on your own." "You don't mean that. You're not like me." "No," I said. "I'm not." That night my parents joined in. Mom's voicemail came first. "We're going to lose the house, Julia. Your father's blood pressure is up. Please, just one more month." Then Dad. "If your mother gets sick over this, it's on you." I turned the phone face down and poured myself a glass of wine. Chloe was at the table painting her little wooden bird gold. She looked up, eyes curious. "Are they mad at you again?" "Yes," I said. She considered this, then nodded. "Maybe they'll calm down if you stop answering." I smiled faintly. "You might be right." 3 days later, a friend from work sent me a video. It was a family dinner at my cousin's house. Evelyn was there, teary-eyed but smiling for the camera, spinning her story. "She cut me off without warning," she said dramatically. "Even took the car back. Who does that to family?" The camera panned to my parents, nodding solemnly. Someone laughed in sympathy. "That's cold," they said. I closed the video halfway through and sent it to Miles. "File for cease and desist." "Use this as evidence," he replied within minutes. "Understood. We'll serve notice tomorrow." By the end of the week, the boutique's landlord posted an eviction notice on the door: "Unpaid rent, delinquent utilities." Photos of it surfaced online, tagged by gossip pages. The same people who once toasted Evelyn's success now whispered about her failure. She texted me that night, "You win. I hope you're happy." I typed back, "I didn't want to win. I wanted peace." Then deleted the message before hitting send. The next morning I took Chloe out for pancakes. We sat near the window, sunlight spilling across the table. She showed me the little wooden bird she'd finished, wings shining with gold paint. "Look," she said proudly. "It doesn't break anymore." "It's beautiful," I said. We ate in silence for a while. Outside, snow melted along the sidewalks, trickling into thin streams. I realized then that peace wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly like morning light. By the time we got home, another voicemail waited from Dad. "Your mother's packing," he said bitterly. "We'll be out of the house by Monday. You'll regret this, Julia." I didn't respond. That night the world went still again. The phone stopped buzzing, the messages slowed. I thought maybe finally the storm had passed. Until the headlights appeared outside. I was reading in bed when the glare washed across the window. A car idled at the curb, engine, low exhaust curling through the cold air. For a moment it didn't move. Then the door opened. A figure stepped out, hair, wild coat too thin for winter. I turned on the porch light. Evelyn stood there in the snow, eyes, glassy bottle dangling from her hand. She swayed once, then started toward the steps. The knock hit the door hard, frantic, familiar. Chloe stirred in her room. "Mom," she called sleepily. "Stay there," I whispered. Another bang. Julia opened the door, Evelyn's voice slurred through the wood. "You ruined me. You think you're better than us. You're nothing without me." I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed, every second recorded. The porch light illuminated her pale face, her trembling hands. I could smell the alcohol even through the door. "Go home, Evelyn," I said loudly. "I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't." But I already had. When the sirens echoed down the street, she froze. Two cruisers pulled up, blue and red lights flashing against the snow. Officers stepped out, voices calm but firm. "Ma'am, step back from the door." She resisted, yelling something about betrayal, about family, before they took her arm and led her away. The bottle shattered on the driveway, glittering like ice under the lights. One officer came to the door. "Are you okay, ma'am?" I nodded, showing my ID and the restraining order on my phone. "Everything's recorded." He nodded. "Good. We'll book her for disorderly conduct and violation of order. You'll get the paperwork tomorrow." When they drove off, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, the night air sharp against my skin. Inside, Chloe peeked from the hallway, her face pale. "Is she gone?" "She's gone," I said softly. She came forward and wrapped her arms around me. Her small hands were warm. "Good," she whispered. "She can't hurt us anymore." I looked over her head at the empty street snow, falling again in thin, steady flakes. The light from the porch flickered once, then steadied. Maybe this was what endings looked like, not fire or fury, just the quiet sound of a door finally closing. The first knock came just after midnight, sharp and uneven against the door. Chloe was asleep, curled beneath her blanket, and for a second I thought I'd imagined it. Then it came again, 3 fast hits, the sound of desperation more than strength. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and checked the camera feed on my phone. Evelyn stood on the porch, swaying under the porch light, hair tangled, face pale. Snow dusted her shoulders like frost. One hand clutched a half-empty bottle, the other kept hammering at the door. "Julia, open up. You ruined my life." My breath caught. It wasn't the first time she'd come uninvited, but tonight felt different, wild, unhinged. I backed down the hall and whispered, "Chloe, stay in your room, lock the door." She sat up, frightened. "Is it her again?" "Yes, stay put." The next hit rattled the hinges. "I just want to talk," Evelyn shouted. "You can't shut me out. We're family." I switched on the camera, recording, and dialed 911. My voice was calm, almost detached. "Restraining order violation. My sister's intoxicated and at my door." While the operator spoke, I watched Evelyn pace across the porch. She kicked at the flower pot, muttering curses, tears freezing on her cheeks. When the sirens began to wail in the distance, she flinched. But she didn't leave. The cruisers arrived within minutes, red and blue lights slicing through the night. 2 officers stepped out, their boots crunching on the snow. "Ma'am," one said, "step away from the door." Evelyn turned disoriented, clutching the bottle like proof of her pain. "She stole everything from me. My car, my store, my family." "Put the bottle down," the officer ordered. She shouted something incoherent, then stumbled as they guided her toward the curb. I opened the door, a crack, cold air rushing in. "Are you all right, ma'am?" the officer asked. I nodded, handing him the phone with the live recording. "She's violating the court order." He glanced at the footage, nodded. "We'll file the report and take her in tonight." As they loaded Evelyn into the car, she looked up at me, eyes red, voice raw. "You think this makes you strong. You'll be alone forever." The words hit me like a gust of wind, cold but powerless. I shut the door without replying. Inside the house was still. Chloe peeked from her room, eyes wide. "Did they take her?" "Yes," I said softly. "Go back to sleep." She nodded but hesitated. "She won't come back, right?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." When the headlights disappeared down the street, I finally exhaled. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was exhaustion. The next morning, Miles called. The police report came through, he said. Violation confirmed. I've already arranged the restraining order renewal, extended duration, stricter boundaries. Thank you, I said. She'll be processed overnight, fined, maybe probation. Don't worry about her anymore. I wanted to believe him. But worry doesn't switch off like a light. That afternoon, I sat by the window staring at the snow melting off the branches. My reflection looked calm, but my hands trembled when I lifted the cup. The line between pity and disgust had blurred long ago. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her either. I just didn't recognize her anymore. A week later, I got a voicemail from Mom. Her tone was brittle. Your sister's out now. The police record will ruin her career. I hope you're happy. Career. The word made me laugh. I didn't return the call. Days passed quietly. I focused on work, on Chloe's school projects, on remembering what peace sounded like. Then a new message arrived from Miles' eviction notice for your parents confirmed. Final date, February 2nd. I sat staring at it for a long time. The words didn't shock me, they felt inevitable. Without my payments, their world had started collapsing too. That evening, the phone rang again. Mom, I answered this time. You're really letting us get thrown out, she demanded, her voice trembling. Your father's sick, Julia. He needs his medication. We have nowhere to go. I gave you years of help, I said quietly. You could have saved. You chose not to. You're heartless. No, just done. Dad grabbed the phone, his voice hoarse. You'll regret this, he growled. We're still your family. Family doesn't use guilt as a currency, I said, then hung up. When I checked the camera later, their car had stopped briefly outside my house. They didn't come in, just sat in the driveway for a few minutes before driving off. By the end of the month, the boutique's locks had been changed. The sign Aspen Grace Boutique was gone, leaving faint letters etched in dust. I drove past one afternoon, parked across the street, and stared through the window. The mannequins were gone. The shelves bare. Evelyn's reflection no longer filled the glass. A couple walked by reading the eviction notice taped to the door. Such a shame, one said. It looked fancy. Too fancy for this town, the other replied. I started the car and drove away. Later that week, Miles emailed again. Restraining order reaffirmed. Evelyn fined $500 for violation. Court warns any repeat offense will result in jail time. I closed the laptop, the words blurring together. I thought of the woman on my porch, trembling in the cold, screaming about love and ruin, and for a fleeting second, I pitied her. Then I remembered Chloe's face that night, wide-eyed, terrified, and the pity evaporated. The following day, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside were official copies of the eviction papers and a letter addressed to me in Mom's shaky handwriting. You've broken this family apart. Your father's health is failing. You should be ashamed. We raised you to care for others, not destroy them. No signature at the end, just the outline of a tear stain on the paper. I folded it neatly and dropped it into the trash. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, I lit the fireplace and sat beside Chloe while she painted. She was working on a new piece, a small wooden box with carved stars. What are you making? I asked. A wish box, she said. You put one good thing in it every day. Then when you forget how lucky you are, you open it again. I smiled. That's beautiful. You can share it, she said. We'll keep our good days together. Outside, the snow began to fall again, thick and quiet. I thought about Evelyn, where she might be now. Maybe still blaming me, maybe drinking herself into another rage, maybe finally seeing the truth. The house phone rang once more, the old number my parents always used. I let it go to voicemail. Their voices filled the kitchen, accusations, please, promises, all bleeding together into static. When it ended, I deleted it and turned to Chloe. What should we write for today's wish? She thought for a moment, brush tapping her lip. Maybe that no one ever hurts us again. I nodded. That's a good one. As she tucked the little paper inside the box, I looked toward the dark window. Snow reflected the flicker of the fire, soft and golden. For the first time I realized that peace didn't mean the absence of noise, it meant learning not to answer when the noise came calling. By midnight, the phone was silent. The world outside was too. Somewhere across town, Evelyn's name flashed on another police report. Disorderly conduct, public intoxication, another fine. Miles would handle it in the morning. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and whispered to the quiet, "It's over." And this time, I almost believed it. The night was still too still, the kind of quiet that wakes you before the noise does. I sat up unsure why my heart was pounding until I heard it a soft shuffle outside, then the crunch of snow beneath tires. I slipped from bed, careful not to wake Chloe, and peered through the curtain. A car sat idling at the curb, headlights cutting through the frost. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a door opened. A figure stepped out, small and hunched against the cold. Even before she lifted her face, I knew it was Evelyn. The same dark coat she'd worn to court, now dirt-stained and too thin for winter. She stood under the streetlight, swaying slightly, eyes glassy, a bottle dangling from her hand. My phone buzzed with motion alerts from the porch camera. I tapped the feed, watching her climb the steps. The first knock was soft, almost polite. "Julia," she called, voice muffled. "Please just talk to me." I didn't move. The second knock came harder, rattling the frame. "I know you're in there." Chloe stirred down the hall, whispering, "Mom, stay in your room," I said quietly. Evelyn's voice broke a mix of pleading and rage. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Sitting up there in your little castle while we freeze." Her words slurred together, swallowed by the wind. The bottle hit the door glass, shattering across the porch. I hit record on the camera and dialed 911. "Restraining order violation," I said calmly. "She's here again, intoxicated." The dispatcher's voice was steady. "Are you safe inside?" "Yes. My daughter's here too. Units are on the way. Stay on the line." I watched Evelyn pace in circles, shouting things I couldn't make out. She kicked at the railing, then slumped onto the top step, sobbing. The sound crawled through the door, familiar and hollow. Blue and red lights cut through the night. A few minutes later, 2 patrol cars stopped in front of the house. Evelyn didn't run. She just sat there, rocking slightly until the officers approached. "Ma'am," one said, "please stand up." She looked at them like she was seeing ghosts. "She locked me out," she said, pointing at the door. "My sister. My family." "Step away from the porch," the officer said again, firmer now. When they helped her to her feet, the bottle slipped from her hand, rolling down the steps. The label caught the light, cheap vodka, half empty. They spoke to her for a minute before turning to me. One officer knocked gently. "Ma'am, are you and your daughter all right?" I opened the door, a few inches cold air spilling in. "We're fine." The cameras recorded everything. He nodded, jotting notes on his clipboard. "We'll take her in for the night. Disorderly conduct, violation of order. You'll receive confirmation by morning." I thanked him and closed the door. Through the window, I watched them guide her toward the car. Evelyn didn't resist, didn't speak. She just looked back, once her face a blur through the falling snow. When the taillights disappeared, I locked the door and leaned against it. Chloe crept into the hallway, eyes wide. "Is she gone?" "She's gone," I said. "For good this time." She nodded, then hugged me, her small hands trembling. I stroked her hair until her breathing slowed. The next morning, Miles called. "I heard about last night," he said. "You handled it perfectly. She'll get fined again, maybe probation. What happens if she tries again?" "Next time it's jail," he said simply. "But honestly, Julia, I think she's running out of places to fall." After the call, I brewed coffee and sat by the window. The world looked soft again. Sunlight glittering on the snow, the porch swept clean except for a few shards of glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. Just tired. Chloe patted into the kitchen, hair messy, wrapped in her blanket. "Do you think she hates us?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, she hates herself. She just doesn't know it yet." We ate breakfast quietly. I watched her stir cocoa into her milk, her focus so pure it almost hurt. That afternoon, a new headline popped up on my phone: local boutique owner arrested for public intoxication. No names, but I didn't need one. The article was short, just a few lines about a disturbance downtown, an intoxicated woman shouting outside a closed shop. The photo was blurry, her face barely visible, but I recognized the tilt of her shoulders, the way she held her arms like a shield. I forwarded it to Miles. "Handled right," he replied. "Already processed. No contact order still valid." I put the phone down and went outside. The air was crisp, the snow beginning to melt. Across the yard, Chloe built a small snow fort, her laughter echoing through the quiet. Watching her, I realized how foreign peace had become fragile, almost frightening. I let it settle anyway. 2 days later, Mom called again. Her voice was hoarse, weary. "Your sister's in trouble, Julia. She's sick. She needs help." "She's had chances," I said. "She refused every one. You've turned your back on all of us." "No," I said softly. I finally turned around. The line went dead. By the end of the week, an eviction notice went up on my parents' rental house, red letters against peeling paint. The chain of dependency had snapped completely now. At night, I lay awake, not in fear, but in thought. For years I had equated love with rescue, peace with silence. I finally understood neither was true. Love required boundaries. Silence, if earned, was freedom. The following weekend, Chloe had her last therapy session at school. She showed her counselor a drawing, a small house, surrounded by snowlight glowing through every window. The counselor smiled. "It looks safe here," it is, Chloe said. When we came home, she set the picture on the fridge beside her math test. Then she went to her workshop table and began carving again. This time it wasn't a bird or a box, it was a heart smooth and strong with no cracks. That evening, a final email arrived from Miles, cease and desist, signed by parents. Case closed. I read it twice, then shut the laptop. Outside, the sunset poured gold over the snow, melting it into tiny rivers. I stood by the door, breathing in the cold air. Behind me, Chloe's laughter filled the room, soft and sure. For the first time in years, no one was calling. No one was demanding. No one was pounding at the door. I turned off the porch light, locking the world out with one quiet click. The war had ended quietly. And this time, the silence belonged to me. For the first time in years, silence didn't mean danger. It meant peace. I woke to the soft light of morning spilling through new curtains, the faint hum of the heater, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. There were no missed calls, no messages blinking on my phone, no fear in the pit of my stomach. Just quiet. Outside, the mountains shimmered under a thin veil of frost. Chloe's laughter echoed from the living room where she was sketching by the fire, her pencils tapping against the table. Our new house sat near the edge of the woods, away from town, far from the ghosts of everything we'd left behind. I walked through the rooms, slowly, still, not used to how calm everything felt. The walls were pale blue sunlight, bouncing off framed photos, just me and Chloe, smiling with our hair tangled by wind. No more family portraits, no more reminders of who we were supposed to be. When I stepped outside, the air bit at my skin, sharp and clean. I watched a few deer crossing the frozen field behind the yard. For a long moment I simply breathed. No alarms, no shouting, no one demanding to be saved. By mid-morning, I logged onto my laptop for work. My boss had sent an email confirming my promotion, senior financial consultant, remote flexible hours, full stock benefits. It felt surreal. A year ago, I'd been the woman who couldn't say no, who lived to fix other people's chaos. Now I managed my own life, and it was enough. Casey pinged me on chat, "Congrats, boss lady, drinks." Soon I smiled, typing back cocoa at my cabin. "I'll make extra." When Chloe came in from the cold cheeks pink, I told her the news. "Does that mean we're rich now?" she teased. "It means we're steady," I said. She nodded like she understood more than most adults ever could. Steady's better. We spent the afternoon decorating the studio behind the house, a space that doubled as my office and her workshop. the smell of sawdust mixed with coffee sunlight stretching long shadows across the floor. Chloe painted her wooden creations while I adjusted spreadsheets. Every so often she'd hold one up, a fox, a bird, a tiny carved moon, and I'd nod approval. At lunch she asked, "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa have a new house yet?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Probably a small apartment. They'll figure it out." She pressed her lips together. "Do you miss them?" I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes held no anger, only curiosity. "I miss who I thought they were," I said. She nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense. "Sometimes I miss Aunt Evelyn too," she whispered. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Missing someone doesn't mean you have to let them back in." After lunch, she went back to carving. I cleaned the kitchen, humming quietly. Every small sound, the clatter of dishes, the scrape of her sandpaper, felt like proof that our lives had become ordinary again. Safe. In the late afternoon, a distant cousin I barely spoke to sent a message on Facebook, heard about Evelyn. "She's been working part-time at the market. Hope things are better for you now," I typed back. "They are. I hope she's okay too." Then, closed the app. Forgiveness wasn't an act, I realized. It was a decision not to reopen old wounds. That evening, while tidying the hallway closet, I found a box I hadn't unpacked yet. Inside was the wooden jewelry box Chloe had made, the one Evelyn had thrown across the floor last Christmas. The lid was cracked along the seam, but the little brass hinges still glinted under the light. "Look what I found," I said. Chloe looked up from her workbench, eyes wide. "We can fix it." She brought her toolkit and laid out the pieces. I watched as she glued the edges, sanded the corners, and brushed on a thin coat of varnish. When she was done, the crack was almost invisible. She smiled, proud. "See, stronger than before." I traced the grain with my fingers. "It's beautiful," I said. That night we placed the box on the mantel beside her golden bird and the heart she'd carved the week before. The firelight shimmered against them, soft and golden. Dinner was simple soup, bread, laughter. We talked about her upcoming school fair, about her teacher who'd asked her to help build a display table. "She said I have an engineer's mind," Chloe said proudly. "She's right," I told her. "You build things that last." Afterward, I sat on the couch while she worked on her homework. The house creaked softly, wood settling against the cold. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make me flinch. It was the sound of a home breathing. When Chloe went to bed, I made tea and stepped outside. The moon hung low above the pines, and the air smelled faintly of cedar. Somewhere far below, the town lights shimmered like tiny fires. I thought of Evelyn again, of how fast everything had spiraled, of how much I'd wanted her to succeed. For so long, I believed saving her meant saving myself. But some people only learn when they hit the ground. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front in familiar handwriting. Evelyn. I turned it over in my hands, feeling its weight. For a moment, I thought about opening it. But then I remembered the night she pounded on my door, the way Chloe had trembled in the closet, the way peace had only come after I stopped answering. I placed the envelope in a drawer. Some words didn't need to be read to be understood. That weekend, Chloe entered a small craft competition at the local fair. She brought her repaired jewelry box and a new project, a wooden puzzle shaped like a mountain range. Her hands didn't shake when she presented them. She spoke clearly, confidently. When the judges announced the results, she won second place. She ran into my arms, breathless with joy. "We did it," she said. "We did," I whispered. The ribbon hung from her workshop wall that night, fluttering whenever the heater kicked on. She called it her proof of strong. As the house settled into quiet, I found myself sitting by the window again, watching snow drift down through the dark. Somewhere out there, my parents were living small and quiet. Evelyn was working through her consequences, and the cycle of manipulation that had defined our family for decades was finally over. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't need witnesses. It was Chloe's laughter drifting from her room, the smell of sawdust and soup, the sound of a world that no longer demanded apology. I closed my eyes, letting the silence wrap around me like a blanket. For the first time, it didn't feel temporary. It felt earned. Tomorrow I'd go back to work, pick Chloe up from school, cook dinner, live another ordinary day. The kind of day I used to think only existed for other people. I turned off the lights, looked once more at the mantel, at the mended box, the golden bird, the carved heart, and smiled. We were steady now. Stronger. Whole. And for the first time, peace wasn't something I hoped for. It was something we built. The morning light spilled gently across the kitchen table, glinting off the rim of my coffee mug. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the mountains in silence. When I opened the front door to grab the newspaper, I saw it there, a small weathered envelope resting on the welcome mat. The handwriting was unmistakable. Evelyn. For a long time I just stood there. My fingers brushed the paper, soft and cold from the snow. A year had passed since the last time I saw her face, but the sight of her writing brought everything rushing back, the noise, the shouting, the heartbreak. I almost put it straight into the trash. But curiosity, that quiet enemy, made me take it inside. Chloe was in the living room, taller, now her hair tied up in a messy bun, sketching near the window. "What's that?" she asked. "A letter," I said, placing it on the counter. From her I nodded. She paused, pencil hovering above her page. "You're not going to open it, are you?" "I don't know," I said, though. We both knew I did. I left it there while I made breakfast, while the coffee brewed, while sunlight slid across the kitchen tiles. Finally, I sat down and slit the envelope open. The paper inside was creased and smudged, her handwriting shaky. "Julia," it began, "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but please read this. I've lost everything. The shop, the car, the friends who only stayed when money did. Mom and Dad moved into a small apartment near Tucson. Dad's health isn't good. They still blame you for it, but I don't anymore. I know what I did. I used you because I thought love was something to earn through guilt and fear. You gave and I took. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to do. You were trying to survive. If you ever think of me, I hope it's not with hate. No request for money. No manipulation. Just exhaustion in ink form." I folded the letter and sat back, feeling neither triumph nor sorrow. Just quiet recognition that this was at last the truth. Chloe appeared beside me, wiping her hands on a towel. "What did she say?" "She said she's sorry." "Do you believe her?" I looked at the folded paper. "I think she believes it." "That's enough. Are you going to write back?" I shook my head. "Some stories end better without another chapter." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Can we put it in the box?" The wooden jewelry box sat on the mantel, the same one she'd made 2 Christmases ago, the one Evelyn had broken, then Chloe had rebuilt. It gleamed now smooth and golden under the morning light. I opened the lid and placed the letter inside. "Let's keep it here," I said. Not to remember her, but to remember that we made it through. Outside, the snow was melting slowly, small streams gliding down the driveway. Chloe bundled into her jacket and ran out to feed the birds. I watched her through the window, tossing crumbs across the yard, her laughter cutting through the cold air. Later that afternoon, we drove into town. The streets were quiet, lined with evergreens and twinkling holiday lights. It had been exactly 1 year since everything fell apart, and yet the world felt whole again. We stopped at a small cafe for cocoa and pie. "Do you think they'll ever change?" Chloe asked as she stirred her drink. "Maybe," I said, "but change doesn't always mean coming back." She smiled. "You sound like my teacher. Your teacher sounds smart." On the way home, the mountains turned orange with sunset. Chloe fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window. I kept one hand on the wheel and one on the warmth of the moment. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder. That evening, I sat at my desk by the fire, the letter still on my mind. I took out my journal and wrote, "Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the decision to stop answering to it." I closed the book and looked around the house. Every corner glowed soft and golden. The scent of wood polish and cinnamon lingered in the air. Chloe's crafts were scattered across the shelves, a carved fox, a painted moon, the heart she'd made from cedar. Our life was full not in money or luxury, but in something rarer. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The air was cold, still the kind that makes everything sharper. I brewed coffee, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and stepped outside. The sky was streaked pink and blue. Snow glistened like glass. Somewhere in the trees a bird sang a single note that broke the quiet. I thought of Evelyn wherever she was, maybe waking up to a similar sky. For the first time the thought didn't hurt. I whispered into the air, "I forgive you." Then I turned and went back inside. Chloe was waiting with her sketchbook. "What are we building today?" she asked. I smiled. "Something new." She grinned, running to the workbench. "Can I design it?" "Of course," I said. She pulled out pencils and paper, sketching quickly, her hair falling into her face. I stood behind her, watching the lines take shape, a small birdhouse with carved stars along the roof. She looked up. "So the birds always have somewhere safe," she said. I nodded. "That's perfect." We spent the rest of the day sanding, gluing, painting. The scent of fresh pine filled the room, mixing with the hum of music, playing softly in the background. By evening, the birdhouse stood finished. Simple and beautiful. Chloe signed the bottom with her initials and added a small heart next to mine. That night, after she went to bed, I placed the new birdhouse on the windowsill. Outside, the world was silent, again the snow falling in small, soft flakes. I whispered to myself, "We built our peace, piece by piece, and this time it's ours to keep." For a moment, I imagined all the people out there like me, the ones who gave too much, who mistook silence for love, who carried families on their backs until they broke. Maybe they were watching, listening, wondering if peace was possible. It is. You just have to stop waiting for someone else to hand it to you. If you've ever had to rebuild after being broken, if you've ever learned that letting go is its own kind of love, then you already understand what peace feels like. Tell me, what does it mean to you? Leave your thoughts below. And if you've been walking through your own storm, stay with us. More stories are coming about strength, forgiveness, and the quiet power of starting again. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well. And sometimes that's the only story worth telling.